Mary, tell me about yourself and how you're related to the station.
I came in May of 1974, and I have worked at St. Louis Public Radio for 48 years.
And you started here as a student.
I was asked to program a classical music show for the then student staff. Thought it would be a summer job, and I would get a teaching job in the fall, and I'm still here. NPR was founded in 1970, and non-commercial public stations were popping up around the country, particularly associated with universities. It was the dream of Don Dreemeyer, and he right off the bat saw the value of having one for UMSL, and he could see how having a non-commercial, high-quality station would really benefit the university and provide a service to the St. Louis public.
What did the station sound like?
Well, the station was primarily classical music, but we did have a news staff and we did a limited amount of jazz. We had blocks of music interspersed with little 5-minute features, and those could be public affairs topics, arts topics. You know, we definitely had a news presence there as well.
Toward the early 80s, what was it like?
There was a lot of energy. We all felt that we were doing something good for the St. Louis community, and the little successes along the way really kept feeding that energy. When you have a radio station or a TV station with personalities, the kind of people who are extroverts who want to be on the radio, you tend to have some real characters along the way.
What kind of technology were we using back in the 70s and 80s?
The studios consisted of a broadcast console. We had 2 turntables, 2 reel-to-reel tape recorders, and then the bane of my existence, tape cartridge machines. They looked like 8 tracks for people who remember that.
How did you edit anything?
Using a razor blade, splicing tape, a splicing block. So you'd literally cut the tape, you'd find your spot, mark it, cut the tape, and tape it back together. So if you made a mistake, it was not easy to fix.
What was the transition like from classical music to mostly news and talk?
Well, what really started expanding the news in the afternoon was the first Gulf War, and NPR started a program that eventually became Talk of the Nation. In July of 1996, the decision was made to go all news talk with some entertainment shows on the weekend. Adding the news programs greatly increased the audience.
St. Louis on the Air has been around for 25 years, and what has it meant for the community?
Well, St. Louis on the Air is the thing that I am most proud of that I have done over my 48 years. I was honored to be there at the beginning. I was the technical director and assisted in producing. Then I took over as the sole producer of the show. One of the areas that were particularly strong was dealing with the racial divide in St. Louis, and this was long before Michael Brown was killed. We had many of the early civil rights leaders on the show. We talked about the inequities in schooling, you name it. I'm hoping we either educated or at least enlightened folks, and I believe we did it in a different way than what people could get on other spots on the dial.
So I've been learning about the history of STLPR and how it grew from its music roots. And the Beacon was a pivotal moment in the development of the newsroom. In 2008, you founded St. Louis Beacon. After 34 years of being a reporter, a Washington correspondent, and an assistant managing editor.
In around 2006 at the Post-Dispatch, many people who'd been there for as long as I had decided it was time to move on. The business model that had supported the kind of work we did was falling apart. Somebody ought to do something about it. And then we're like, you know, we should do something. It was very much a collaborative project. And so we came up with this idea that was just beginning to be explored around the country of having an online nonprofit news organization.
Fast forward 5 years, you dreamt up this merger along with other colleagues. Can you tell me a little bit about why St. Louis Public Radio was the right partner for this merger?
News organizations really couldn't break into their separate silos anymore. We were trying to figure out how to do in-depth coverage, regional coverage. Figuring that out took more than a year and involved really everybody on both staffs and a lot of people in the community. In the beginning, people were kind of curious, but very supportive. And they also stepped up with pledges of financial support. They said, no, we're going to give you a ramp to try this, some breathing room to make it work. and it did.
And it was, in fact, the first merger between a nonprofit news organization and a public radio organization. How do you see that as informing where we are today?
In order to serve your community, you have to be in a constant mode of innovation, working creatively with partners throughout the community. It's much different than when I first walked into a newsroom, but the role of journalists is still hugely important, but we have to be creative about how we do that work.
So were there certain values that you were adamant that you wanted to take into this new merged newsroom?
In fact, that was the whole intention from the beginning, was to take these values that we had learned in decades of working at Joseph Pulitzer's newspaper and bring them into this new digital and audio universe. And, you know, I think of reporters as being on a constant search for the truth. And to be on that search for the truth, you have to be both audacious and you have to be humble. You have to be audacious enough to challenge everybody's assumptions, including your own, and you have to try your best to nail down the facts. You're never the expert on the experience that somebody's had. They are. And you're very grateful if they trust you enough to share their stories with you. Covering a region like St. Louis, there's so many divisions here. Divisions by geography, divisions by race and ethnicity, by gender. All those things can divide people. A news organization makes it possible for people who are over here to understand what people over here are thinking and what their life experience has been. To understand that in certain ways, the community has to succeed or fail together. To find a source that can kind of give you that community-wide perspective. And that's why local news organizations are so important.
When that merger occurred, St. Louis Public Radio became a powerhouse in terms of local journalism.